when someone does go down with an injury. What do you think, is the best thing for the player in that circumstance? So let's say, 14 days into their hamstring return to play, and they do their hammy again. Do you think sending them home is the best place to give them space?
Firstly, I think you really need to probably as a team, as a sort of medical performance team, be able to own it and then reflect on it and then be able to at least communicate roughly an answer. And that's probably the first part of it would be, okay, this is what we did and this is where we fell down. And sometimes that can be quite simple. Sometimes it's as simple as we just overprogrammed you on this day. We just let the chaos come in a little too much and we weren't quite ready for that. And that's our fault for letting that happen. Well, this is what we're going to do next to really arrest this and change this. Or it doesn't have to be we know this will work. It just means this is what we're going to do different. This is where we think we fell down. So if they are going to have a few days off and again, that's obviously to unwind and sort of get away from the environment.
What about in circumstances where you find out maybe the athlete wasn't reporting as well as they should have? You can then influence your decision-making on reducing load or progressing the program faster, or whatever it might be.
Those big meetings where everyone's in a room, sometimes there is a little bit of pocket of information that comes out that says, yes, the player's been trying to cut a bit of weight at the same time they've been rehabbed on the weight again, so they haven't been having an adequate nutritional intake, or someone reports a life load or a stressor or, poor sleep or moving house and these kind of things, which hopefully as rehabilitation manager, you're kind of across those conversations and there's enough trust to be picked up. But clearly, like I said, sometimes that doesn't happen. There has to be an element of what else can you do in your side of things, whatever X amount of time that you're not at the club, what are you doing and how are you going to be driving that same sense of empowerment so that we both feel like we're on the same page.
In your experience, what have been the more common, factors that lead to or potentially increase the risk of reoccurrence with soft tissue in the AFL?
The big rocks, I'd say, in rehab are going to be, a misdiagnosis. So inevitably, sometimes that meeting, again, the meeting where you're in the room and, we sort of pull up the scans again and there might be sort of someone that, or the doc or one of the physios might say, well, actually it looks like, and you might even get another report from a separate radiologist or something like that, and you say, there actually is a little bit of a tendon component there, and that kind of idea. So it's a broad, just a subtle change in terms of the diagnostics, which might, certainly would infer potential, prognosis in rehab. So again, right at the time, not respecting early healing is a really big one. So, inevitably the tissue's failed. So that the physiological processes that are going through that system at the time, they're very important to embed down scarring, I guess, if you like, or set the framework for, what's to come in terms of reloading it. So if you're, trying to get things going really quickly, you might just be interrupting that, I guess, cellular process, and that may have consequences down the track.
What about, accelerated sort of return to play compared to conservative? Like, what are some of your decision makings around whether you can go down the accelerated route?
Inevitably, that we know there are some athletes that can cope quicker. We'll have a framework, but if someone it's their first soft tissue injury and they've got such a strong chronic loading base behind them, we know that what we've seen on, let's say, hypothetically day 14, rehab sessions have been able to sort of blow it out the park. And for those guys, we're really confident that, just throwing out the 21-day kind of example, but those guys are really confident about their, return to play capacity because they don't have much of that contextual factors and they're highly functional and resilient athletes. But even if things aren't quite perfectly healed, they'll find a way to cope with the demands, at least we hope, versus the others, which might be like we're kind of talking about before, they're just on the yo-yo up and down, and it might not necessarily be the high-grade injuries or the sort of tissue type that we'd be concerned about, but they just don't have that chronic base of loading and proof of competition capacity. They just don't have the continuity of it.
What about communication, mate, with yourself and the coaches? Are you in direct communication with them, or is it more high performance manager, equally with the players? Do you update players on a weekly basis, the whole group, on how the rehab list are going?
I'll defer a lot of kind of discussions about the I guess, not so availability, but the current status of our athletes will be sort of filtered through Phil Merriman, our high performance manager, who, is a great leader in the way that he will, I guess, he puts a lot of trust in his staff, and so I really appreciate that. So he will kind of, I guess, gather the information and deliver that ultimately to our coaching staff. That's our kind of system, I guess, in a broad sense, a reporting sense. Inevitably, I'll often have conversations, usually, let's say, with a medium-term injured athlete with their line coach about the sort of ways that we can, keep the athlete empowered to be working on their craft or their potential holes or areas that they can, attack a little bit more.